Thanks, Pam. And Pam, just checking, we've got the link. You can put the link into the chat there, so that we've got the link to the live survey.
Yep, I will do. Yep.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into today's presentation on the Great British National Annex survey. What we're looking at today is this is a follow-up session from a meeting we had a couple of weeks ago titled the Great British National Annex Debate, focused around the UK BIM Alliance communities. This meeting was focused around looking at the comments for the new National Annex for ISO 19650 and looking at people's proposals of which bits should be added, amended or changed as part of this kind of new review. So the debate ended up kind of having a lot of discussions around what should be added, why things should be added. And for anyone who wasn't on that discussion, the presentation was around kind of splitting down into groups for infrastructure, for buildings consultants, for owners, operators, and getting each group's views on why the proposed National Annex does or doesn't work for the way they're operating on projects. So fast forward to today, what we got out of that meeting was a long list of different comments, ideas and thoughts around how the National Annex should be updated. What we're trying to establish now over the next week or so through having the Great British National Annex survey open is to get people's thoughts and opinions on the statements as they were proposed, to see whether those statements are agreeable by the majority of the industry or whether they're just the opinions of one or two people. So what we're going to run through here is a survey, and you'll see in the chat, Pam has posted for us a link to the Survey Monkey we're going to run through. So what I would advise is if you can load that Survey Monkey link on a second screen or alongside this GoToWebinar. It'd be useful to kind of fill out as we run through the presentation here. And what I'm going to aim to do is just talk through a little bit of the context around each of the questions in this survey. What we're not proposing here is we're not proposing to have a large debate into each of the comments. The debate was obviously the last session, and Pam's also posted for us the video there of that debate session. Okay, so these are what have come out. We're trying to establish then how many people support or kind of disagree with those comments that have already been made. So let's say you can follow that Survey Monkey link. This will be open for a week or so now as a live survey, so you can fill it in now as we run through the presentation, or you can pick that up and fill it in later. And please do circulate this round as well if you know of anyone else who's got some thoughts and opinions on this. The more feedback we can get on this, the better. The more kind of weighting we get behind some of these comments, hopefully the more traction we can get with making those changes. So I'm going to step on, as I say, run through each of the questions within that survey link. And I'm just going to give some context behind these. With this context, the way things are broken down in the survey is we started at the top of the National Annex. So we started from the beginning. We're splitting down into things like general comments, and then we'll step through each of the kind of naming fields. So with the project, the originator, one by one. And this is also how the survey is structured there. So we've got the first of the general comments on the overall document. Obviously, ISO 19650 exists to ensure that we have consistency and standardization across projects, and it avoids project-specific details from being generated. So the first general comment we've had is, should all references for a project, all references to a project-specific code for naming fields be removed? So at the moment, each of the fields, for example, the role codes, the spatial settings out, the systems, allow additional codes to be defined for project specifics. So should this be changed, and should the clause say something more aligned to removing those project specifics. Okay. So the question to answer is, should all references to project-specific codes be removed, and should the National Annex not suggest that project-specific codes can be added? And the vote in the SurveyMonkey there is either yes, you agree, so you agree that all the references should be removed, no, you don't agree, or there's a kind of neutral no decision if you're not one way or the other on this. I'll give you a few seconds to review that. Moving on to the next question. These are kind of in the block under the same general comments heading, still focused around kind of the National Annex as a whole. This question, where common or standard codes are used, these should be included in the National Annex. So the debate around this one was focused on having lots of additional codes, and there's certain project-specific codes which have not been included in the National Annex. And from the debate, people were suggesting that some of these codes are used time and time again by lots of people in lots of different projects, but there's no consistency tying them together. So where additional kind of project-specific codes are always used, should those codes be added back into the National Annex? So should the National Annex be expanded to contain a lot more of these common codes? For example, when we look at the levels of locations or the spatial field now, the floors, should we additionally include a lot more detail on those? Should more detail be included around the kind of file types or the role codes? So should that expand out? And again, focusing on this one, if you believe that additional codes should be expanded and these should be included in the National Annex, vote yes. Or if you don't believe that, no, or the option to kind of choose a neutral, not sure. Okay. Question 3 in this section. But do you feel that asset owners don't usually understand BSEN ISO 19650 suite of digital data standards? So the kind of comment on this one was, I think, whilst we've got this National Annex here, do we think more work needs to be done to include asset owners as consideration within 19650? So do they need incorporating more into the National Annex? Also, do we need to get that information out and get more involvement from the asset owners? So again, the statement here, looking for a yes, they do need to have more involvement, no they don't, or a neutral response. Okay, question 4 in this section, we've got, do asset owners need guidance to better understand the value of these standards? Now, perhaps this one falls outside the scope entirely of the National Annex and something that should be included within there. But in terms of the National Annex, should the actual National Annex document include more guidance and more clarification for why asset owners need to utilise these standards? Do those asset owners need more guidance within the National Annex itself? So we can vote yes, no, or neutral, no decision. So those were the kind of general comments at the document as a whole. What we're looking down to now is a bit more of the detail around each of the clauses themselves. So we're looking first of all from the start of the document at clause NA 2.1, which is the clarification clause. And I've copied below at the bottom of this slide the actual clause itself as it currently sits within the National Annex. So within that clarification statement there, the question we've got in the SurveyMonkey is, do you agree that project codes, including the sub-projects, should always be unique across an organization's complete storage system. So within this clarification, it talks about the common data environment enabling information to have a unique ID and having those things. But should this be unique across the full storage systems, not just the CDE? So the kind of clarification here and the debate was around saying that the National Annex should clarify that when using project codes to specify sub-projects, uniqueness should be required across the full CDE. So codes shouldn't be duplicated across multiple projects within one client organization. So do you agree that those codes should be unique? Yes, no, or neutral opinion. On to clause 2.2, which is the information containers. Again, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens the extract from the National Annex itself and what these information containers refer to. So these are the fields that make up the full naming system. And the first question we've got under this heading is, should a plain language but optional description field be added to the information container naming to aid human readability? So at the moment we have these several fields. The debate was around that sometimes these names can be difficult to understand and read from a human perspective. Obviously, the reason that these codes have been put in and broken down by the delimiters is to aid computer reading. But do we need to go back a step and add in a description field somewhere within this name so that humans can understand what is in each of those files? So that's the vote on this top question, is whether or not that description field should be added at all. So yes, you think that optional description field should be included within the National Annex. No, you don't, or neutral opinion. The second question under this heading is, should additional or optional fields, e.g. this description field we've added above, be separated by an underscore? So if you suggested that yes, you think a optional description field should be added, should this additional or optional field for description be separated with an underscore rather than a dash which separates each of the other fields within the file naming? Still sticking on NA 2.2 with the information containers now. The next question we have is, should the ability to use asset IDs rather than project IDs be included in the National Annex container naming? So at the moment, we're suggesting looking at this project code at the start of the information container. But should the National Annex suggest that naming of files could also be based on an asset rather than necessarily a project? And the debate around this one was focused initially from the infrastructure part of the discussion, that projects can begin and an asset can be built, but that asset may have multiple projects applied to it over its life cycle. And if we stick with the project related code, each time that project is expanded, each time that asset is changed, modified, refurbished, it will have a different project code. So should there be a scope expanded within the National Annex to focus the naming based on the asset itself, rather than a point in time when a project was completed on it? So again, a vote on this one is yes, you believe that ability to build the naming around an asset ID rather than a project ID, you'd vote yes. If you don't believe that should be included, vote no, or neutral description. We're staying on information containers here. And this question is a clarification required that only alphanumerical characters should be used for field codes? So at the moment, the project, the originator, system, spatial, etc., there's no description that says what those values should be. As we mentioned earlier, project-specific codes can be added. So there's currently no mention that special characters, for example, underscores, slashes, exclamation marks, asterisks, can't be used within those file namings. So should a clarification be added to the National Annex that says only alphabetical or numerical characters be included? Again, looking for a yes, no, or neutral vote on that one. So again, on the information containers, a lot of detail on these. The first question we've got on this slide is, do you agree that the discipline should be moved from its current location? So at the moment, within the information containers, the discipline is put as the second to last field, just before number. The debate in the National Annex debate discussion was around moving that discipline field somewhere else, higher up the hierarchy of those information containers, on the basis that when you're sorting or organizing information based on a alphabetical sorting of information, the discipline field should focus higher up that organization field. So it should be more important than being the second to last value for sorting. This also means that all disciplines information will stick together when sorting, rather than sorting initially by systems and spatial. So do you agree that that discipline code should be moved in the ordering of the information containers? Yes or no? And the follow-on question from this is, should the discipline be moved to the third field? For example, we will have the file naming as the project dash the originator, then dash the discipline. So moving that discipline into the third field. Again, on this one, if you think that's a good idea and that's where it should sit, vote yes. If you don't think it should be moved to the third field, no. Our last one on the information containers field is, do you agree? That's a duplicate. Okay, that was the last one. So on to National Annex Clause 3.1 with the clarification. The question here we've got is, to aid project consistency, should the National Annex define that the actual length or variable length fields be defined and documented in order that they remain fixed and consistent throughout the project? So we've got the clarification section from the National Annex at the bottom right corner of your screen. And there's several of these fields where the recommended length is variable. So for instance, the project can be anywhere between 2 to 6 characters, the originator between 3 to 6 characters, discipline 1 to 2 characters. So the suggestion and debate around this question was, if you decide that your originator code is going to be 6 characters, should that be specified in the National Annex that if you decide to choose 6 characters, that will be documented for the project, and that consistency will apply to everyone on the project. So again, likewise, if a project field is going to be 5 characters, the project documentation should specify that the project code is going to be 5 characters, and everyone must comply with that on that project. And this could be written into the EIR or the BIM execution plan. So if you believe that it's a good idea that that clarification needs to be added, please vote yes. If you believe that that shouldn't be added, please vote no. Next one on clause 3.1, the clarifications, is to aid adoption, should an explanation as to why the maximum character lengths are added to the national annex. So this is the first question under here. So in the bottom of the clarification table, we have a statement that the overall maximum length for a file name is 32 characters. So the debate was raised that an explanation should be included within the national annex as to why that 32 characters exists in order to support and aid the adoption of that standard. Again, if you believe that the clarification needs to be added, please vote yes. If you don't think a clarification is needed, please vote no. Next question we've got is, alternatively, do you believe that restrictions of field lengths are not necessary? So should field lengths actually be defined and fixed on a project by project basis? So again, relating back to the maximum string length of 32 characters, is that limit actually necessary? If it is or isn't, should that be defined on a project by project basis? So if a project believes that the overall maximum length should be 22 characters, they can specify that on a project. If they believe it should be 50 characters, again, they can specify and fix that on a project by project basis. If you agree that that should be project specified and that needs clarifying in the national annex, please vote yes. If you believe that we should stay with the specified overall maximum of 32 characters that's currently in the national annex, please vote no. Staying on clarification, looking at the system and spatial sections. So at the moment, both system and spatial are set to be 2 characters. So there's 2 questions on the SurveyMonkey in this section. The first suggestion is that the system field is currently 2 characters, and this field should be increased to allow up to 6 characters. So the proposal here is that the recommended length could be increased and changed from 2 characters to a variable field of 2 to 6 characters. So if you believe that needs to be expanded between 2 and 6 characters, please vote yes. If you disagree with that statement, please vote no. And on a similar aspect, the next question relates to the spatial field. Again, same as the system, it's currently 2 characters, but should this field be increased to allow up to 4 characters? So the proposed change here is to suggest that the spatial field should be increased and allow a variable field of between 2 to 4 characters. Again, if you agree that that should be done, please vote yes. If you don't agree, please vote no. So moving to the next segment, we have clause 3.2, which is related to the project field within that naming system. Again, you've got an extract on the screen here that shows those components. So the next question is, should the National Annex provide a method for identifying multiple buildings in a single project? So the project code is a single project, but if you have multiple buildings or multiple kind of projects underneath that, sub-projects, should they provide a method for that? And this is really to expand on note 2, where it says a project can be divided into sub-projects. Should we give examples of how those sub-projects should be defined and how multiple buildings in a single building project should be categorized? So if you believe that we should add clarification around multiple building projects, please vote yes. If you believe that note 2 currently covers this, please vote no. Now we move across to the next field, in the naming, which is section 3.3 and the originator. And the question here is, should an organization be allowed to generate their own originator code for consistent use across all projects? So again, you've got the extract from the National Annex at the bottom here, and this suggests that the organization code is given to the organization and specified and defined for them. The clarification here is that organizations should be consulted as to what their consistent coding is rather than having it defined for them. So rather than a client or information manager on the project telling a company what their code is, should the preference and the clarification in the National Annex state that a company should, where possible, continue to use the same company coding across every project they work on. Obviously, allowing for some situations where that doesn't work and multiple companies would otherwise be sharing the same originator code, that would have to be dealt with separately. So if you think that clarification should be added, please vote yes. If you think the originator coding is currently clear as it is in terms of that, please vote no. The next question is set up the originator section, but actually more refers back to 3.2 and the project naming. And the question here is, do you think that this needs to be changed to accommodate client project numbers? So looking at the current statement from the National Annex about the project numbering, the project says that a single common project identifier should be defined at the initialization of a project, and it should be independent and distinct from any individual organization's internal job number. Now, the Great British National Annex debate spoke about this and said, well, according to that text, the client would have an internal job number, and this clause in the National Annex stops them from applying their job number as the project coding. So should this be updated, and should the text instead state that the code should be independent and recognizably distinct from any individual organization's internal job number and be fixed within the project information standard? So should it only be that the appointed parties can't use their job numbers, but the appointing party could utilize their project number if appropriate? And if you agree that that needs to be changed and updated, please vote yes. If you think that is currently acceptable as it is, please vote no. Section 3.4 on the system. You have the system coding extract from the National Annex on the screen here. And the question raised during the debate was, there is a view that the intended purpose of system is not clear. Do you have a clear understanding of the system field? So does this description here around what the system field is and how it should be used, is that currently clear enough for you to understand that and use that system coding on your projects? So if you currently understand what that is and you think this is absolutely fine and doesn't need any changing, please vote yes. So if you understand exactly what system refers to. If you don't understand what system refers to and you think this needs to be expanded and clarified, please vote no. You don't have a clear understanding of the system field. So staying with clause 3.4 on the system, the question is, there is a view that the standard is written from a model perspective. Do you believe a solution is needed to allow drawings to be listed in numerical order without having to revert to XX in system and spatial? So this debate aspect was relating to the system and the spatial codings If these are utilised and if buildings are broken down into different systems and spaces, then the drawing numbering won't take priority, and the sorting of drawings and information will be done based on those system and spatial codes rather than on the drawing number itself, which is the last field. So the question here is, if you believe that a solution is needed to make sure that those drawings can be listed in numerical order, please vote yes. If you believe that the system and spatial are currently fine and you don't necessarily need those drawings to be listed in numerical order, please vote no. Again, a similar question here on the system field is, if a CDE solution is being used, we can apply metadata. So as the system field is currently defined, do you believe there is currently a recommendation for adding metadata outside of the file name? And should more guidance be provided in the National Annex for including metadata using a CDE or a document management system rather than placing this information within the file naming itself? So moving through the codes, our next clause is National Annex 3.5, looking at spatial. And again, there's an extract of the spatial section from the National Annex on the right-hand side of your screens. And the first question we have for spatial is, should examples of spatial use relevant to infrastructure needs be added? So at the moment, the debate in the infrastructure group went down the route of all of the provided standard codes are related to building projects. So should this list be expanded and an equal list of examples be given that could relate back to an infrastructure style project? So if you believe infrastructure codes need to be given in the examples, please vote yes. If you think that we're okay with the current examples, please vote no. Second question within this field is, should the spatial field be renamed to location to aid understanding? So currently 3.5 is, and the field container is called the spatial container. Should this be renamed as the location container? Is that easier for people to understand? And if you believe that should be renamed to location, please vote yes. If you don't believe it should be renamed, please vote no. And the third question under spatial relates to mezzanine drawings. So in the example list here, we're given the levels of the building, so O1 for level 1, O2 for level 2. We're also given examples for mezzanines. And the mezzanine codes are currently M1 for a mezzanine above level 1 or M2 for a mezzanine above level 2. And when this information is sorted, it won't sort in the correct order. So the suggestion is that the example should be swapped, that the mezzanine above level 1 should be classified as 1M. The mezzanine above level 2 should be classified as 2M. Again, if you agree that change should be made, please vote yes. If you disagree with that change, please vote no. So next we've got clause 3.6, which is related to the type coding. Now under the type coding, we've got the extract from the National Annex on the right-hand side of the screen. Our first comment from the National Annex debate was around the codes of CR and MR, which used to exist in the old standards, but do not appear in the new proposed National Annex. So do the codes CR and MR, which represent flash rendition and model rendition, be added back into the type field and be given back in this list of standard codes? And if you think they should be added, vote yes. If you think they should not be added back in, please vote no. Second question under this type field is, do the type codes need to be expanded to cover BIM specific documents such as the BIM execution plan? So currently those standard examples relate to a lot of different project related documentation, but do we need to add in additional fields for BIM documents such as the BIM execution plan or the employer's information requirements or exchange information requirements? And question 3 is, BS ISO 29845 already defines document type codes. Should this alternate ISO be utilized in place of the type codes given in the annex? So there is this ISO which defines what the type codes are. Should we utilize an existing ISO on type codes of documents rather than using type codes created in the National Annex? Again, if you agree with that, please vote yes. If you disagree and think we should stick with the type codes that are given here, please vote no. Sticking with type, another suggestion, moving on from the suggestion that we align with the other ISO, is should the type codes instead be aligned to Uniclass 2015? So should these example standard codes instead be related and aligned to Uniclass 2015? If you think they should be, vote yes. If you don't think they should, vote no. And finally, on the type field container, we've got the proposed code of MO, which represents a model. This MO code doesn't allow sufficient separation of files, so instead M2 and M3 should be added back in, again from a previous standard which related to a 2D model and a 3D model. So if you believe that MO model should be replaced with M2 and M3, please vote yes. If you think we should stay with the MO proposal, please vote no. Okay, so next we come on to the discipline coding. And 3 questions that were raised or comments that were raised around about the discipline coding. And again, you can see that extract on the right-hand side of your screen. The first one, similar to the last question, is should the role codes given in this table instead be aligned to Uniclass 2015? So instead of the standard codes given in that table, should the roles be aligned to Uniclass 2015 coding? If you agree, vote yes. If you disagree, vote no. Question 2 for the discipline is, are additional codes needed to include roles such as the information manager, the contractor, the combined services, interior designers, acoustic engineers, etc.? Okay. So the National Annex does give scope that this can be expanded, and this list here can be expanded with other project-specific codes. But do we need to add some of those additional job disciplines, job roles into the National Annex as examples? So if you agree that this list needs expanding with additional codes for roles such as these, please vote yes. If you think that the current list of standard codes is suitable, please vote no. And the final question we have on the discipline field is, should all of these discipline codes be completely removed and replaced with only an option of free discipline? And this would either be you are an appointing party, a lead appointing party, or an appointed party. So should these discipline codes be changed and replaced with either the appointing party, the lead appointed party, or just the appointed party, and a selection of one of those three? If you agree that that is something you'd like to see, please vote yes. If you disagree with that statement, please vote no. On to clause 3.8, and the last of the fields is the number field. Again, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the extract of the proposed National Annex number field. And the comment raised here is, should the number field be explained in more detail of how it can be expanded to provide drawing grouping? So there was a presentation and some debate around this within the National Annex debate session, that the number field on its own needs to be kind of expanded and utilized to group drawings together by their types or into drawing sets. So should the National Annex explain how to use the number field for grouping of drawings, e.g. using the first part of the number to indicate a group? So if you agree that a little bit more explanation needs to be given in the number field for how you use it to group information, please vote yes. If you believe that we don't need any more explanation of how drawings can be grouped, please vote no. So moving into section 4 of the National Annex now, we're looking at some of the status codes. And you can see in the bottom right of your screen the status code section, and the majority of this is focused around table NA.1, which gives all of the status codes. So the question here is, should the rules and constraints for which status codes should be used for different types of information, i.e. graphical and non-graphical documentation, be added back in? So this was something that came from the original British Standard 1192 series and has been transferred over to the National Annex with the status table. Now, originally this contained multiple columns for which codes should be applied to graphical information and which codes should be applied to non-graphical information. The proposed National Annex here doesn't make that differentiation. So do you believe that this should be added back in? And vote yes or no, whether you believe that that differentiation should be included. Section 4.2, sticking on the status. So should the table NA1 here include examples of how the approval process works on a real project? So should this National Annex give examples and give guidance on how to utilize the status codes using examples of information on a real project passing through the various stages? If you agree that some examples should be given about the approval process, please vote yes. If you believe they're not needed, please vote no. The second question here relates to B1. And one of the debate comments is that B1 is unnecessary. Why would you issue a document with partial approval? Should B1 partial approval be removed completely. So if you believe that section B1, which is the bottom row of this table, which has the description of partial sign-off, if you believe that that should be completely removed from the National Annex, please vote yes. If you believe that needs to stay and partial sign-off is important, please vote no. Sticking on the status table here, the next comment we had from the debate is getting authorization is difficult. As usually we get no comment rather than authorization, information is rarely approved. Should a no comment option be included? So this relates again to the second to last row in the table under the published section, that A1, A2, A3 is authorized or accepted. Should another row be added where there's no comment or no comment option is acceptable? So if you believe no comment would be useful to you and you'd like to see that included in the National Annex, please vote yes. If you don't believe that's needed, please vote no. And the final comment on the status section, or final question, relates to rejected and archived statuses should be added to the available options. So additional rows should be created within the National Annex to deal with information that's rejected, so it has a rejected status code, and also information that's archived should have an archived status code. So if you believe both of those statuses should be added to this table, please vote yes. If you don't believe those are needed, please vote no. So into the last couple of slides now for these questions, coming to the end of the survey. We're now looking at NA section 4.3 relating to the revision coding. Now, the revision coding deals with issuing different revisions and also working with preliminary revisions, which are point revisions. So the debate and comment from the National Annex debate a couple of weeks ago was that the revision codes are too complicated and never used in reality. Should we remove the sub-revisions, e.g. P01.01, and require only full revisions, P01, P02, CO1, CO2, etc., to be used? So this relates to, do we need to remove the second sentence from the National Annex and remove the details, and the third sentence, remove the details about the preliminary revisions, so that we only have full revisions when information is issued? If you agree that those preliminary revisions need to be removed, please vote yes. If you believe that they are fine as they are, please vote no. And our final section for clarification is section 5.1, the clarification section. And again, on your screen, you'll see what the clarification section currently covers. One of the recommendations raised was, should guidance on how to use the Uniclass 2015 PM table be included within the clarification section? So should this section of the National Annex also include details and guidance on how to use the Uniclass 2015 PM table? And if you agree that guidance should be added, please vote yes. If you don't think that needs to be added, please vote no. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the National Annex survey. I hope that's been useful to clarify some of those questions. We're really looking forward to kind of getting your feedback and seeing how appropriate some of those comments are, so that we can feed this information back to the BSI and make sure the National Annex is updated in a way that suits industry and suits kind of best working practice. So thank you for your time, and aware we have the UK BIM Alliance National UK BIM Alliance BIM Forum coming up. So with that, I'll hand back over to Pam, who will hopefully take over and wrap up for the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Brilliant presentation, I have to say. We've had a couple of comments in. I don't know if you want to have an attempt at this, but
Yep.
So the first one is, if it is M1 or 1M, it still won't be in order.
Yeah, so I'll skip back to the slide because whilst I'm talking through this, but I'll also caveat this, which I kind of briefly covered at the start. So these comments here, we've not modified or amended as the BIM Alliance Communities team. So we don't see our role as kind of vetting people's thoughts and opinions. So the questions you're seeing here are not the UK BIM Alliance's thoughts and opinions on the question. They are exactly what came from the people who were involved in that debate. So yes, in terms of that question, 1M, 2M still wouldn't fall in order because it's not 0, 1M or 0, 2M. Okay. But that's the proposal we've been given, so that's kind of what we're voting on in this. All I could suggest with that is that you feel a kind of mixed opinion or a neutral opinion on that, and add that as an additional comment, obviously directly back to the feedback form if you believe that should be changed to something slightly different.
Okay. Third question for National Annex 3.6 reads lead appointing party rather than lead appointed party.
Yes, I tried to kind of read through that one. I believe that should be appointed. And that's a typo.
Okay, so we'll change that in the survey. Table NA.1, the question regarding rejected and archived should be 2 questions, as they are different issues and the answer could be different for both.
Yes, again, completely agree that you probably might want to vote separately on those. Again, I'd probably go down, the only answer we could give at the moment is to vote neutral if you kind of agree with one but not the other. Please let us know that feedback directly, and we can always add that as an additional comment when we feed this back.
And then that's it. So the survey will be shared, the link will be tweeted again today, and it'll be part of the newsletter as well as mentioned on the forum call, which starts in half an hour or so. But yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mike, for delivering this, and let me take the chance to thank everybody for attending. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Pam.